Thank you. I want to begin by associating myself with Commissioner Pai's remarks about designated entities, and we've visited about this. The thing that's the rest of the story was not explained is that not only was this a very big company using small businesses to get a $3 billion advantage, one of the entities that was used was an Alaska Native Corporation, which, if I think most people are aware, that they don't have any rules about being small. So it is insult to injury, because Alaska Native corporations are multi-billion-dollar, multinational corporations that get special deals under our law. They don't have to compete. They don't ever age out of the program. They never get too old for the program. They never get too big for the program, and you confront legally. So this is really, I think, outrageous, and I hope we can figure out a way to get to the bottom of it. I want to talk about Lifeline a little bit. I've visited with many of you about Lifeline. I think it is a program that began under, I believe, President Reagan, President Bush. You know, it was a subsidy. It morphed into a program without any kind of controls, without any kind of regulation, and it was a mess. Now, I know we've had some enforcement, but I know we've had a pilot program on expanding it to broadband. Let me ask you first, Chairman Wheeler, when will the report on the pilot program be available?
Senator, I can't give you the specific date, but it's in the next couple of months.
Well, we had some enforcement. There hasn't been much in a year. There's a list of reforms, I think, that include, and if any of you disagree with any of these reforms, if you would speak up for the record, I would appreciate it. Taking eligibility determination out of the hands of carriers. Competitive bidding, making sure consumers have some skin in the game, placing a cost cap on the program. Anybody disagree with those 4 reforms? Okay, I would like to see those instituted, and I would like a discussion from you about whether or not it makes sense to continue the Lifeline program. Doesn't it make more sense to make it a broadband program? Looking at the homework gap, looking at the capability of making calls over the internet, doesn't it make sense to institute these structural reforms as we transition this from a program where no one has skin in the game and we have allowed the carriers to commit massive fraud in this country? Doesn't it make sense to convert this whole program over to broadband? And I would love your take on that.
I'm not sure who yours is, but I'm
Any of you can speak up? I'd love somebody to speak up who disagrees with doing it. So
well,
I
was showing my Southern graces. I cannot sit before you and say I necessarily agree with everything you laid out. One of the things that I am adamant about, I put forward 5 principles last year. One of which I think is the most important that would get to the heart of some of the problems that we're having is getting the companies out of the eligibility game. They should not be in that space. When it comes to grocery stores, do not certify or have people eligible, for SNAP. They're not in that game. Doctors do not qualify people for Medicaid. Providers should not qualify people for that program. It should be an independent arm, and I truly believe that a lot of the issues that have plagued this program, if we take them out of that, would go to the heart of what we were seeing. Oh, please.
I wanted to, Commissioner Pai and Commissioner O'Reilly, I've had an opportunity to talk to the chairman about this idea. Would you be willing to work with the Democratic commissioners on a program that had controls and had reforms in it that transitioned over to a broadband program?
Absolutely, and as you may know, I actually wrote recently about this issue and put forward some of my principles in reform, and I thought that it would be helpful to start in a review of the existing program and all the issues that it's faced before we go to the broadband expand the program to broadband. That hasn't seemed to be where the direction we've been getting the signals internally. So I've tried to put forward reforms that I would think that we could do going forward. But I think we should have that fundamental conversation on the reforms that should be in place before we go there.
Or maybe they're in lieu of.
I would be open to that as well.
Senator, first I want to thank you for your leadership on issues of FCC fiscal responsibility, including the AWS-3 auction and Lifeline. With respect to Lifeline as applied to broadband, I think it's critical for us first to learn the lessons from the pilot. Obviously, before expanding
Right.
to the entire broadband industry, we want to understand how the pilot has worked. Secondly, I've put forward in a speech at the Citizens Against Government Waste a number of different principles for reform, including some of the ones you've talked about. And I think it's critical for us to institute those first to ensure that the program is on a stable footing, because remember, the Lifeline program is the only one of the 4 Universal Service Fund programs that is not capped.
Right.
And so if we don't have those basic reforms for the process as this program stands, if we expand it to include broadband, there's no telling what kind of problems we might encounter.
Sure. In 1985, when Ronald Reagan was in the White House, that's when we started this program. It was last updated during the Bush administration. It is time to modernize this program along the lines you described, make sure it is free of any waste, fraud, and abuse, and then make it address broadband and things like you described, the homework gap.
Right, great.
And this is not a question of how do we take what's there now and just do a paste here or a change there. We have to look at this entire program, soup to nuts, and say, wait a minute, this started in a twisted pair environment, metamorphosized into a mobile environment. We now live in a broadband environment. Why in the world are we sticking with the decisions of the past?